Blizzard Entertainment presents Midnight, the newest expansion for World of Warcraft. Midnight calls every hero home to Azeroth. All paths lead to this moment. Xalatath rises, the Void follows, and the Sunwell stands in peril. Raiders, explorers, storytellers, newcomers, and legends alike. This is your world, your story, your moment. Because Azeroth is home, and home is always worth fighting for. Pre-purchase now at worldofwarcraft.com.
Savaged, unfiltered. Hey guys, welcome to Savaged Unfiltered with Michael Gardner. I'm your host, Michael Gardner. Today, guys, we are joined with Branch Isole. He's a poet, a storyteller, and he's known for writing 22 books. And he's also known for his YouTube channel, Branch Isole, on short stories. Guys, let's welcome Branch in. How are you doing, Branch?
Good morning, Michael. I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
And thank you for being part of the show today. Branch, I had looked at some of your work, and I must say, sir, it is very, very fascinating. With some of your poetry that you had wrote, sir, and some of your short stories that you have on YouTube. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What brought you to that place in life, and maybe other experiences that you have experienced throughout your life?
Sure, thanks. 50s and 60s in a military family, so I tried in my early years. After college, I entered the corporate world in sales and marketing, and after a couple of decades of that, I got out of the corporate world and became a small business entrepreneur. And in the last 25 years, I've been writing and publishing. So the writing is, a collection of thoughts and ideas that I see around me. I use the people that I observe and experience as the basis for the stories. All of the stories are written for readers, so they have opportunity to self-identify the character in the story and then pull something from that hopefully applies to their life.
Sure. And obviously some of these stories that you write, there is meaning behind the story. Are these more of on a personal scale, sir, or is it just mainly, just a story? Because each story does sometimes have meaning behind it. Some stories have, they can be fictional, they can be factual stories. So, just let's dig into some of these stories that you had wrote. What's the meaning behind them, sir?
Well, basically the same 12 lessons in life. I mean, that's the fundamentals. Experiences feed back to our growth and so the stories themselves, that's the idea. The characters may be different. They're not autobiographical. A lot of times what I do is I'll go into situations where I see or sort of eavesdrop on other people's conversations. And from what I glean in their verbal behavior, I readers to develop a story. So the theme or the underlying lesson that I'm trying may have come from observing, someone else in a situation, but they're basically fiction stories with real life implications for the reader. Perspectives, some from females, some are written from the point of view of a child or a teenager. So it's sort of all across the board in terms of the character and the plot, but it's basically so that the reader story and then glean from that, hopefully, some theme or underlying lesson that they've read.
Oh, sure, sure. And I've seen some of your poetry online, your website there, and some of your past appearances on other shows and podcasts and such like that. Can you explain, throughout this amazing journey that you had, which I've happened to, dig a little deep into your past and present, sir. It wasn't always, that great, with sunshines and rainbows, if I may add that. Can you dig into, just a little bit of, you know, um, what made you start this amazing journey? If you want to add in any of, past maybe turmoil, if you'd like to, explain your testimony on the show, I'd love to hear it. But, I do know that, like I said, it wasn't always that great, right, sir?
No, that's for sure. Just like everyone else, I've had my struggles and my ups and downs. Life does that to us. It throws us into situations where we have choices, and out of those choices come certain consequences. And growth takes place when we've experienced some negative outcome for us, and in the future we're confronted with a similar situation, and we can choose to repeat that choice and the possible negative consequence that we've known from our past, or we can choose to take a different path and different choice. And I've made some interesting and some costly choices in my life. The first half of my life I spent embracing the things in the world, and at the end of that journey, I discovered that everything I had accomplished and all of my success had been frittered away or given away or taken away. And so at that point, I decided to change my life's path, and that more spiritual journey that has allowed me to refocus my energies and my efforts to try and be a better person in my life, in my family, and in my community. A lot of things in the past I'm not happy with, embarrassed or ashamed by the choices I made. Key was I learned how to quit making those kind of choices, believing that it would be different, and actually change my path and change so that it would be different.
Right, right. And I see that you love using that phrase, thought for today, which I find very fascinating because, each poet, maybe storyteller, author, whether they're writing short stories or books, they always have that phrase that they love using. Can you explain to us, what's behind that phrase, thought for today?
Sure. Originally, when I started writing, I used to musicians use cover songs in order to learn their craft. As a writer, when I first started writing, I would take quotes from other people that fascinated me, and with a story. And I soon discovered that the stories started giving me thoughts instead of the reverse. And so I would sit down and try and find a thought to me that particular day, so I could begin that day sort of fresh. And so that's where the thought for the day came from. Adding those to the writing, prelude to a story.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds amazing. Some of your journey. We were digging into your past and everything, and I've noticed that you have had a successful life, through corporate marketing and stuff like that. And you also had a a downfall to that. That you had hit rock bottom. Did you want to get into some of that? I mean, I've seen some of it was very sad, sir. How did you overcome all that, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I as I said, I was embracing the world, and I went shy of the law. I spent a number of years outside of the law, and dearly, I ended up in jail for a short time and facing a 99-year prison sentence.
Oh
And
my God! Wow.
when the door on the jail slammed shut, the realization choices that had brought me to that point in my life, I realized that once that door no longer had control of any part of my life. And mulling over that thought, at that moment I thought, well, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to, begin afresh. I'm going to reinvent myself and become a different person with different goals and ambitions. And luckily for me, the case was dismissed of court. And once I had done my first stint in my arraignment phase in jail, I never ended up going to prison. But that consequence changed my life, and I knew I had to be a different person going forward. So that was the probably the downside. I had lost my family and lost all of my material goods, so I ended up starting again, but I was homeless. And so I was at rock bottom and thought the only way to go is up, and I will try, to go up as high as I can.
Yes.
Different method and using a different path.
Yes, I mean, what we have today, sir, is our cornerstones are basically our truth, our love, and our trust and belief. And I know that is a phrase that is basically on your website as well, but it's a phrase that I use a lot myself. Uh, you know, we have to look at life um, as a prime example of such as yours and others too. Life is not easy. Life is what you make it. And sometimes, our decisions that we make in life are not always the best. I can say, for myself, life has been, very hard with me sometimes. But, sometimes you have to put on that hard, so to speak, backpack and just continue with your life and try to make it the best that you could possibly make it, you know. But I want to get into a little bit more about behind Branch, the man, the author and the poet himself. You're known for your series here. Your spirituality series. You have poetic series. Your intimacy series. Is What made you get into those type of series? Because those are very, very rather interesting series, sir. If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, a number of times that they're certainly different, and how can I write about spiritual growth and grounding on the one hand, and write about sex on the other hand, and
Yeah.
all things are part of life, right? I mean, we all experience a variety of situations which test or change us in our growth periods and in our growth phase. You can't discount sex as part of your life. It's part of our human nature. It's also
Sure.
part of our reproduction, and it's part of our intimacy and our attraction to others. So, the people who have problems with some of the verbiage I may use or some of the situations that I present, it's all part of life. And that's what I'm writing about, is adult life experiences that everyone has either experienced firsthand or through somebody that they know, having gone through trials and tribulations of life, the emotions that are psychological impact that's involved, part of who we are and who we become as we grow through life. And so sex is part of it, conflict is part of it, stress, pressure, these are all part of it. And a more balanced person, we have to look at those parts of our life and see how we respond, to the events or the people that have us in those situations. And then, was that response beneficial? Was it a growth response, or was it a response that cost me more than I had thought it would? And so I write about life, and I write for adults. I don't write for children. But for those people who, if they have a problem with me writing about spiritual growth on the one hand and hot, raw sex on the other, then they can skip that story, or they can understand that I forgot to ask them going in what they wanted me to write about.
Yeah, my next question was, I was going to ask you, due to our society, of what we are now in our nation and across, of course, across the world, do you find it a little difficult sometimes, with some of your articles that you come out with some of the people that may question this, because obviously, like I said, our society is a lot different now, sir, than it was, 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's more, I think, in my own personal opinion, because I do a lot of political viewpoints on my show as well sometimes, where I get into, a lot of questions with people that constantly question, because the demeanor behind it, like I said, is a lot different now, because we live in, like I said, and this is my own personal opinion, folks. So please don't, apologize for that. My window is like right near a main expressway here, so you might hear some sirens. But like the society we live in, sir, it's just like it's oversensitive. Do you find that in your own personal opinion as well, or?
First of all, I love the people who question, right? I mean, that's how you grow.
I'm sorry, question guy. Yeah.
Keep asking why and trying to get, a truthful answer. That's what I find is difficult today. With our technology, we have immediate access to really everything in every place in the world instantaneously. And so we have to and sometimes aware of what we're being told and what we're sold.
I like that. Yeah.
The having discernment is key, because, if you listen to any conversation, usually both sides have merit in the things that they are trying to promote or propose. And you have to look beyond the conversation. You have to look to the agenda. You have to look to what is it they are trying to believe, and do they have any truth in that agenda? So we live in times where we are bombarded daily, or have the possibility of being bombarded with all kinds of topics, opinions, and all kinds of facts. I agree 100% with with what you've just said. It's very difficult. Life used to be literally about survival. Up until industrial revolution, most people spent a good part of their for food and shelter. And
sure,
revolution, everything changed. Our time management and our time changed. We have machines that were doing, manual labor. So when life changed at that point, then life became more complex as the political fabric and the economic fabric all sort of came together and were woven into a new tapestry. It wasn't merely about finding the food and protecting your family that day. All of a sudden, you had time to think about and engage in other kinds of activities. Grew from the Industrial Revolution, into the information age, and the technology that we now have allows us to be exposed to and learn from or believe a myriad of things every day. Some are in our best interest, and some of them are not. That's where the discernment comes into play. What in this decision is this really to perform or respond this way, and who will it benefit or who will it harm? And that's an interesting question as we go through our day. But so many people, are bombarded from one to another, or 1 minute to another, to make a new decision, at play, all things. And so we're trying to juggle a lot of different choices with a lot of interest and impact being placed upon our decision.
And I think, Branch, we find that as we live in a more digital age, right? Everything is more digitalized. Obviously now, we can send electronic mail through platforms such as called email, and with our instant messaging, through social media and other platforms. I think today. And the reason why I brought this up with you is because, you come from a generation where you had mentioned before where everything was a lot easier, or at least society looked at it as that, right? It was a lot of an easier pace of a society. Nothing was, because today, obviously I'm a lot younger than you. I was born in the early 80s, but, today we look at society now where everything, in my honest opinion, sir, is it's more rushed. Nothing is really, presented well. So I wanted to ask that question to you, pertaining to, you're an author and you write a lot of short stories, and you deal with a lot of poetry and other avenues of work. So I wanted to see if that has affected, your work at all, with the type of society we have become, very loose society, sometimes yet very oversensitive society. Words do, are looked at very serious now in the 2020s than they were 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It wasn't necessarily any easier, but it was different. When I grew up, we all have the capacity for love, right? Everyone can give and receive love. Grow up, we all crave approval, then from our peers, and then finally from the world at large. And we grow up and we find that everyone has an agenda, right? Everyone is trying to engage us for their own purpose. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It just is, how we interact. And growing up in a non-digital age, we didn't have access to as much information. You got the information from your school situation, you got the information from your family situation, and you got the information from your neighborhood or your community situation. But it didn't go beyond that. The other things that were happening outside of your, might get through the news, but you have sort of an instantaneous firsthand observation of them unfolding, where you could opinion or input onto take place. So in that frame, yes, but just as I was growing up, just as you were growing up, and just as people are growing up today, one of the things that motivates us is how we appear to people. What is their perception of me? And that hasn't changed at all in this country as we've become, the powerhouse economically and then militarily that we have in our past. This constant, what is my performance like? What will people think of me? And I think in the digital age, that has exacerbated that. When I grew up and in high school, you were worried or concerned about, what your classmates thought of you, who you were, what you were doing, what part of the group you were. Now, today, with the advent of digitized information.
Hey, you guys. If you're looking for a steak, I know it's hard to find steak, right? A lot of restaurants that just overcooked, undercooked, just not to your taste buds, right? You want that juicy steak. Look no further than Omaha Steak. I love them, guys. Love them. If I didn't love them, why wouldn't I be promoting them on the podcast today? Go over to Omaha Steaks, okay? They are phenomenal, guys. The juiciest steak you'll ever taste in your life, okay? A lot of people are like, well, how does it get delivered to your house, with gnats and bugs going to get into it? And no. It's not, you don't have to worry about all that. It is in a sealed, perishable bag delivered to your house. So you don't have to worry about the gnats and the bugs get into it. It's fresh from the time they ship it from their distribution center to the time it arrives at your house. The juiciest steak you'll ever have in your life, guys. Check them out today. Omaha Steaks. They're phenomenal.
That has exacerbated that. When I grew up and in high school, you were worried or concerned about, what your classmates thought of you, who you were, what you were doing, what part of the group you were. Now, today, with the advent of digitized information and marketing, this push to be a celebrity in whatever your arena or endeavor interest may be, motivation to be number one and to be on top in your industry is all and pushed by access to the digital world. So what we have is a lot of digital world to present themselves to as someone that they are, when in reality they are not that person. So I think this plays into, this fast pace and what can I get out of this situation? It's me, regardless of what harm it may do. It's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, it is tough. Yeah, I'm sorry. You had mentioned in a very interesting topic. You didn't say the words, but you pretty much went there. With the original peer pressure. Back in the day, and I can relate to that. I was bullied in school, and made fun of through middle school and high school. But I think that's more of that's normal. I think everybody has been bullied through life. Once or maybe sometimes a few times, in their lifetime. But, today it's looked at on a very, very different level. We have more digitalized devices that we use in our hands. We're constantly on social media, interacting with friends, family, and work colleagues. What do you see it differently now, than, maybe in, your generation?
Well, we didn't have technology and the access, and your life in the 50s and 60s revolved around your immediate environment and, what you're active or inactive in that environment. Today, I can connect with anyone across the planet, talk about anything, is my opinions, whether they be, truth or fabrication, and the person at the other end just has to believe me or not. And so that's the point I'm trying to make, is we're trying to, our ideas to others, but are my intentions for good and growth and advancement, or are they nefarious? Am I to hack someone's information by having contact with them? It's a whole different world, and it's very difficult sometimes to keep up, especially with, the pace and the opportunities that are out there.
Right. But like
when I see children, who are growing up with a handheld device in their hand at all times, and yet that's their only communication growth, it's very sometimes to, have a one-on-one conversation goes beyond 140 characters.
Right, but like I was just about to say that, with your rule of practice of what you specialize, I know you specialize in the 7 steps, towards relationships and repairness to that, which I'd love to get into if you don't mind. Those 7 steps are. Do you see, what we're talking about now with cell phones and tablets and other modern technology? Do you think that with the modern technology that we have today, do you think that it's literally destroying our way of life today? It's taking us more further away from one another at all?
It's definitely having an impact. Who, that's their whole life is connected to a device. They're missing out on personal interactions. On the other hand, it's like anything else, television, any technology has its benefits and its detractions. And so it's a choice of whether or not I'm going to use my devices to benefit my growth, my livelihood, or am I going to use the negative or the nefarious things, the dark web, to what I think is important to me, regardless of the harm that it does? It's a choice, and it's like anything else. There's a good side and a not so good side to it. The choice is going to be mine as to how much technology I'm going to use and for what purposes.
Yeah, I mean, this links into very interesting conversation viewpoints here on the show. I mean, we're talking about technology. We're talking about relationships. How it can play a big role and affect each and every one of us. The technology that we have today can be looked at as a good thing and simply sometimes as a bad thing. I was mentioning this just yesterday on my show with my co-host Soslin, and we got into it in great detail with just sometimes how technology has to be used on a responsible level. We can't really let it overtake in our livelihood and our society, because that's the next thing I wanted to say. With this new form of AI, do you see AI playing a big role in relationships? Modern relationships. People that are, whether they're married or have just a common partner in life. I mean, where do you see that going in the near future, if you can comment on that?
Well, I heard that episode, so I'm in tune with you on this. Yeah, again, what is the intent, and then how it's going to be used as the end user or the recipient. even how much am I going to buy into it? One of the issues right now with our, and particularly in the future with AI and the expansive integration that it's going to take place within the device, mechanism world, is how much information am I going to make available about myself that can then be turned against me? And that's we all are interested and declare that we want civil freedoms, but the more information that governments have, corporations have, the powers of wealth have, that they've got on us, the more information they can use against us for whatever their intents are. And so we're in a precarious position, I think, going forward. The benefits of AI are there in order to help us in productivity in areas and quality of life. And at the same time, 1984 came and went, but that possibility control, and we see it already in some other countries, and here in this country, if we have paid attention, NSA has not always data they've collected what they've told us they had. So the AI, advancing could go turns against us, or those who have control of it use it against us. And so, there's on the future and there's trouble ahead.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm a big tech guy. I love tech. I mean, but I see it as a destruction course for us in the next 50, possibly 100 years or so, where our technology from where we have gone from. I mean, I'm in the middle of this brink, so to speak, of technology. Like I said, I grew up in the 80s. I seen the technology from the 80s through the early 90s into right around 98, 99, where dial-up internet was basically a thing, and then when Wi-Fi and wireless internet came out, that was a big shock for all of us, especially the nation and the world, where that's where the technology literally took its boom from. And where I seen it then to where I see it now, I think, and this is my own opinion, folks, I think it's literally driving us off course with relationships, friendships, marriages. I'm seeing more divorces and separations and anxiety in families and stuff like that more than ever. Even in the workplace. I mean, you see it more than ever now than it was 20 years ago. And this is only 20 years ago, Branch. This is not very long ago. I mean, we're talking a 20-year span. Can you imagine what's going to happen in the next 20 years? If this span is only reaching 20 years, and look where we went from 2000, from the technology from 2000 to 2022, and look what it's doing to our society with relationships and everything else. High anxiety levels, our mental illnesses is at historic highs. Can you imagine in the next 20, 30 years where it's going to bring us at? It's very scary.
It is scary. And again, if you invest yourself in the technology, cognizant and question the thing from the technology. Are they in your best? It'll be interesting to see when it goes down and no one has access to their iPhones and iPad how their behavior, and their response to that will be. You see all of the end of the world scenarios in movies and television shows, and people turn on others pretty quick when what they're comfortable and what they're familiar with has been taken away. So if you ever suffer an EMP attack or goes down for extensive periods of time and people can't use their devices to communicate and get their information, say hello to all their friends, it'll be interesting to see how they respond in that situation.
Well,
enter some danger at that point.
Yeah, well, Branch, I think we're in the beginning stages of that. I reside in Florida here, only about 45 minutes west of Cape Canaveral, and I've seen a transition phase from the original formula of NASA now going into whether it's SpaceX or Space Force there, which has a high influence over there in Cape Canaveral, and they're sending rocket after rocket up in space, and I think they're preparing for that. Like you said, that grid, to eventually collapse, where it's going to affect our entire country, and when that happens, it's gonna put the world in shock, because, like I've mentioned, for the last 20 years or so, we've become so englued with digitalized modern technology that we're in a society and we're in a standpoint, if I can use those words accurately, where if it were to shut down, we wouldn't be able to handle it. Like, look at the people today. There are more people ordering online and through apps than, going to a store. I mean, there's, apps for people to order their groceries on and this and that, which I think is great, for elderly people that can't get out. I mean, that's wonderful. That's a great idea. But I mean, what I'm talking about now with the grid, I mean, we're right at that point, Branch, where, I mean, it could happen with a snap of a finger, and I don't think anybody would be ready for it.
No one is ready for it because they're not preparing for that to happen. They don't believe it can happen. They're unaware that it could happen, or they simply trust that it won't happen. And yet everything that is taking place today, if you look at it, it's incremental steps. And I'll give you an example. 3 years ago now, I guess, right? Or 2 years ago plus, when COVID, we went through a series of responses to that situation that affected virtual. Now,
sure.
With now very few people still wear masks. COVID viruses are still out there. They're now part of our community. It used to be like when you got the flu, that was something you only got it once in a while. And then every year, it kept coming back and coming back. Well, the same thing with all of these new viruses. It's here to stay in various iterations. Some people will continue to wear masks and get shots. Other people will not for their own reasons. But it's here, and it's going to continue to take lives year after year after year. Now we have monkeypox, right? And it's sort of getting out of hand. They're behind the curve in trying to get a handle on it. And I just read yesterday that polio has made a resurgence again. And so you've got all of these incremental steps that are taking place that when they first happen, it's hair on fire. What are we going to do? Get used to it being part of our lives. It's not so bad. We shot and not get the flu. That's great. If I could get the shot and not get COVID, that's great. If I could get the shot and not get monkeypox, that's great. But in every area of our life, you see it in our economics, you see it in our climate, you see it in our social structure. When these new events take place and throw everyone into a panic, we get used to it, and then the panic is gone. But what's happening as by incremental steps, we are losing, I don't want to say control, but we're losing our sense of how to respond. And you said it a few minutes ago, we have to depend heavily on the digital information world. And I'll say again, information you're getting truthful, or is it being fabricated for something for a whole nother purpose? And that's, things I sent with you on the decline, a variety of tomorrow would throw our world into turmoil.
Yes. I think, you mentioned COVID, with, new viruses and this and that, I can comment on that just briefly. I think it's the science behind COVID hasn't changed, but the political agenda to it all has. You mentioned people not wearing masks, not social distancing. That's the political agenda to it. That has changed, but the science behind it hasn't. The science has always been the same. Of course, we're going to have new viruses and bacteria that's going to be introduced to this world as time goes by. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. But as more as we become a digital society, which we're going into that route. The more we become reliable on AI and other modern technology of different machines and such, the more we become imbalanced of our true definition of what we are, as human beings. And I think that's what's driving us behind of our true purpose in this world. Like I mentioned before, with relationships and stuff like that, it's the relationships today are a lot different than they were, when I was a little boy. Like marriages, people were, the marriages stayed, I'm getting off my point here, but that the people were, were more into glued together. They were more involved with one another. There was nobody really sitting at the dinner table with a cell phone in their hands. They loved one another. They gathered more. And this and that. You don't see that today, and I think it's sad that we've become a society like that, where it's affecting everything.
Well, people sat around the dinner table in the 50s and 60s, sometimes before TV dinners came out. And not all of them were having quaint or quiet conversation. Our inherent human nature hasn't changed, in the last 5,000 years. We are still self-focused and self-energized, and we still, are in it for ourselves. That hasn't changed. You can see it in man's inhumanity to his fellow man. Every aspect of life. You said something about relationships, and life is about relationships, and the foundation of relationships, whether they be at home or at work or in families, extended families, is about trust. And I think you hit on something a moment ago. We live in a world now, again, our digital access, that we aren't sure who to trust. So we're trusting those with whom we identify, and we agree with their point of view. And that, because of digital world's ways to manipulate, you can be told fabrication, and it looks like it's, trustworthy truth. And that's, that's it, that we foundation ourselves in trust and truth. And that's where that AI component, comes into making us believe things that, we ordinarily or in our base existence wouldn't believe.
And that ties into the the spirituality world. That could be on another episode, but that's completely affecting the church today. Where AI has literally, in my personal opinion, has invaded the church. You see all these things today. With modern technology more influenced on the church itself, and like I said, that could be on another episode, but Branch, we're going to be closing it out here soon in the next few minutes here. But, I like to say here in closing, I think as time goes by, I think, and as technology becomes more evolved and this and that, I think we have to look at society as a precious gift, because it can be taken away with a snap of a finger.
I couldn't agree more. It's at best. And that's why, that strength of family is important. That strength of self-identity is important. Strength of spiritual grounding is important, because when we're spiritually grounded, we automatically have an access for the truth.
Yes, absolutely. You nailed it right on the spot. Branch, here, we're going to close it out here, sir. Did you want to, leave any type of show notes here where people can follow you and possibly find some of your work, sir?
Sure, Michael. Thanks for asking. If they go to my website, Branch Isole, first of all, there's a link there titled podcast. If they go to that link, it will give them some additional information, a free PDF download they can read about some of the things we also, as you mentioned, my YouTube channel, where I have stories and articles and thoughts posted. So I invite anybody to check it out.
Great. Thank you, Branch, for joining us today. And yes, everything you had said was very interesting. And I myself will continue to follow your work, because some of it is very fascinating, and I love to read more of your journey, personal journey, and some of your poetry, as well as your articles that are posted on your website. Guys, today you were joined today by Branch Isole, an author, a poet, and a content creator through YouTube. Some of his work is amazing. I highly suggest it. Thank you very much, Branch, for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next time.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Okay, sir.